we finished up the series, and there was a couple things that I wanted to touch on and talk about, but it wasn't necessarily enough to do a full episode on. So this is kind of like a bonus content thing. It shouldn't be that long, but I just wanted to touch on a few things when it comes to the psychological warfare on these things. So one of the elements that we kind of touched on, I didn't go full in depth with and kind of give an extensive history on, has to do with the advancement of what we see when it comes to brain computer interfaces, or BCI, or also known as brain machine interfaces, BIM or BMI. And so these are the chips that are being put in people's heads that they're starting to do things like Neuralink, BlackRock Neurotech, Synchron, DARPA, and what we talked about going back to the 60s, the CIA and MKUltra was in fact doing the beginning trials of this by putting electrodes in the brains of bulls in order to control their thoughts and their movements via that way. So this BCI brain chip is just an extension of what was going on back in the 60s. And so I want to touch on this. And so, again, we're not going to do a full extensive history when it comes to this, but I thought I would go ahead and just kind of use this as a prime example of it, because I think this is key to this. And so we can see here, and it says miniaturized brain machine interfaces, BMI, BCIs, process neural signals in real time. And so if we kind of take a look at what they got going on here, it says brain to text conversation involves decoding neural signals, the signals that our brain generates for thoughts, speech, movement, and anything in between, even emotional response and whatnot. Involves decoding neural signals generated when a person imagines writing letters or words. So if people don't realize, when you're writing something or even talking to somebody, you are actively sending signals to your brain of the letter that you're about to write, the word that you're wanting to get across, even the sentence. Like me, a lot of the time I cut my sentences off halfway, or I speak really fast because my brain is already 2 sentences ahead from where my mouth is at. And so I just kind of fall over myself. But we constantly send signals to our brain to get to that next thing before we're actually even writing or speaking them. And so this computer interface, this BCI, is being able to find those signals and transfer it to the computer just by what we're thinking at the time. So yes, we are entering into the territory of computers reading our minds. Yes, we are indeed getting to this point. And so in process, electrodes implanted in the brain record neural activity associated with the motor actions of handwriting. The MI-BMI chipset then processes these signals in real time, translating the brain's intended hand movements into corresponding digital text. This technology allows individuals, especially those with locked-in syndrome and other severe motor impairments, to communicate by simply thinking about writing, with the interface converting their thoughts into readable text on a screen. So they always take the avenue of, this is for the impaired. This is to, help those who are disabled or have these types of problems. But ultimately, we understand that's just a way of presenting it, so society is conditioned to accept them. Ultimately, what they're trying to do is trying to get on a level where they want to implant this in people, so they can read our thoughts. And this always pertains to what the Antichrist is going to do when it's lying signs and wonders in order to perceive that he is supernatural or God. He's going to be able to read the thoughts of people. That's my speculation on it. And I think this is playing a very intricate part to getting that done. So if we keep going, it says current BMIs record the data from electrodes implanted in the brain and then send those signals to a separate computer to do the decoding. The MI-BMI chip records the data, but also processes the information in real time, integrating a 192-channel neural recording system with a 512-channel neural decoder. And if we finish this off, it says to be able to process the massive amounts of information picked up by the electrodes on the miniaturized BMI, the researchers had to take a completely different approach to data analysis. They discovered that the brain activity for each letter, when the patient imagines writing it by hand, contains very specific markers, which the researchers have named distinctive neural codes, or DNCs. Instead of processing thousands of bytes of data for each letter, the microchip only needs to process the DNCs, which are around 100 bytes. This makes the system fast and accurate with low power consumption. So energy problem solved. This breakthrough also allows for faster training times, making learning how to use the BMI easier and more accessible. So basically, I just wanted to put it in there that they have discovered a way to make the real-time processing power much faster, more instantaneous, as well as reduce the energy cost, which again will be using body energy in order to fuel this thing as well, which is another element to this. So I wanted to bring up BCIs, computer interfaces here, because when it comes to mind control, when it comes to psychological warfare, when it comes to reading minds, this is a very impactful environment when it comes to data collection. Obviously, they want to try and gather as much data on us as possible to use for their AI algorithms for predictions and being able to basically predict our future ahead of time because they know us better than we do. So if they have access to our thoughts, they've got a whole new level of predictive power for their AI algorithms. What does this do? Well, this unlocks the ability to understand how will we react to things, how will we think about things, how will we respond to these things, and they can predict them and maneuver us through like a Hegelian dialectic system to be able to better understand how will we respond to the things that they are wanting to do, ultimately controlling us, moving us in the direction that we want to go without even realizing what's going on. So this is a form of mind control. We covered Hegelian dialectic in the series, which has to do with moving society in the direction that they want to do, whether it's through political paradigm or through problem action solution. Again, going back to Freemasons' order out of chaos system. And they will move society, move them in the direction that they want to go, even with society without them knowing. So having access to our thoughts, being able to read our thoughts, will be able to do that, which is another form of mind control. And again, I made reference to the lying signs and wonders that the Antichrist is going to have access to. If it has access to our minds, it will be able to present those lying signs and wonders in a very interesting, more in-depth way that people are going to believe that he is, in fact, God. And of course, we know when the abomination of desolation comes, he's going to sit there in the temple and declare himself to be God. So this is a way to give people the ability of a much godlike supernatural ability rather than just a basic supernatural ability that he'll be able to do. So I wanted to bring this out. There's many different ways of using these computer chips for other reasons, but again, we're just trying to narrow down onto the psychological warfare and mind control aspect of this series. And another technique that they're using when it comes to this is in the form of quote unquote therapy. So I think this is very interesting. And so an interesting form of therapy that they're using is to target and alter the brain in transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS. So if you're a doctor, you may have come across this or heard about this as well. So the concept of TMS is to use a magnetic coil to send repetitive pulses into the brain to activate certain neurons. They can target emotion, regulation, and other brain functions to alter them. And it's most commonly used in medical therapy as a concept that can be used in a wide variety of applications, usually to manipulate an individual who deals with depression or PTSD or any of these type of emotional responses that can trigger or cause like fissures within brains and whatnot. So they'll use this as a form of therapy in order to kick people out of those situations. Now, the thing is you can use this technology, and I believe they've got it available, and they may have used it. I've seen some interesting things coming out of China when it comes to microwave technology, but also magnetic technology for crowd control, in order to get people to lay down, to respond emotionally to something. So if you can gain access to people's emotions, that's a very interesting way of manipulating and utilizing mind control over people's emotions when it comes to these things, whether it's a giant crowd meeting, say like a political rally, a religious meeting, or anything like that. If they have this technology turned on, whether through towers or something like that, again, if you want to start getting into conspiracies, we're not here for that. But utilizing these things in order to manipulate people's emotional response to whatever's going on out there, I think is key, or individual targeting, however they so choose to do that. Now, going after emotions is very, very interesting when it comes to manipulating people. People often have emotional responses to whatever's going on, and emotions for many people trump level-headed common sense or critical thinking. Again, using people's personal bias or an emotional response on a piece of information, people will use that to bypass critical thinking and stop and think about the information that's being given to them. So if they can deliver some type of something, I don't know, say the picture, an image of the beast or something, and get people to move in certain directions to manipulate society, they can do that. Or a political leader of some type, or a religious offering, or a piece of agenda or something. If they can manipulate the emotions to overcome critical thinking, which is something that's running rampant today. I'm not saying that they're using magnets for that, but they'll be able to use that to alter society and move them in the direction that they want to go. Another form of mind control. Emotions are also something that's being used when it comes to the BCIs, the brain computer interfaces. Synchron, the main guy at Synchron, has talked about how they want to be able to have their chips be able to throw emotions. What does that mean? Well, they want to be able to skip the idea of going up to somebody and saying, "How's it going? How are you feeling?" And having the person try and the other person try and describe how they're feeling, and the person who is hearing this information doesn't necessarily understand what the person's feeling. The person at Synchron said if those people have Synchron chips in their brains, the person can throw the emotion of how they're feeling at that exact moment, and the person who asked the question will be able to actually feel exactly as the other person does, giving them a deeper understanding of what that person is going through. So they want to be able to use BCIs to throw emotions, and through this technology, they're using magnetic fields, magnetic coils, in order to manipulate emotions. So going after emotions is something that is very important when it comes to the satanic, demonic technology with these things, which, again, I've talked about when it comes to a lot of the churches that are allowing mystery religion in there, the music specifically. It targets people's emotions to overcome critical thinking, to give them the idea that they're having a God experience or feeling the Holy Spirit, when in actuality, the music itself is designed to manipulate the emotions of people, to give them that false idea. And so we can probably think of many ways that can be used in the beast system, not only politically, but religiously as well when it comes to the worship of the beast. So something to think about on that. Now, another aspect, a bit of information that I wanted to put forward when it comes to it, is the use of lasers and infrared technology. Usually when we think of lasers, we think of like Star Wars and Star Trek and stuff like that. But there is a whole level of laser technology out there that we don't even realize to some extent. When it comes to reading biometrics and stuff, there's eye sensors that when you walk into some stores, Walmart's got them. The HEB superstores that we have around here actually have them too. There are these cameras at eye level that actually use biometric lasers to read the iris scans and facial profiles of people when they walk through the door. There's that type of laser technology. There's also laser technology when it comes to reading people's heartbeats. If you don't realize, kind of like each individual has a unique fingerprint, we actually have a unique heartbeat, every single one of us. And so they actually have laser technology that can read the heartbeats of people and determine and identify who you are based solely on your heartbeat. And so that's laser technology that they have. But another level that they're working for this has to do with controlling the brain circuits using infrared light. And so we can see here, this is back in 2022. This is something they've been working on for a long time, and it's only advanced here into 2024. But it says researchers controlled brain circuits from a distance using infrared light. Let's see what we got going on. It says now, scientists at the WuXi Neurosciences Institute at Stanford University have developed the first non-invasive technique for controlling targeted brain circuits in behaving animals from a distance. The tool has the potential to solve one of the biggest unmet needs in neuroscience, a way to flexibly test the functions of particular brain cells and circuits deep in the brain during normal behavior, such as mice freely socializing with one another. So we can see here that not only are they trying to access the circuitry of a brain for data purposes and research purposes, seeing how it operates, but they're trying to find some way to get into the door, to create some type of doorway to control those very processes that's going on. And it says the newly published technique builds on the foundation laid by the optogenetics, a technique first developed at Stanford by Wu-Tsai neuroaffiliate Carl Dieseroth. The collaborators that introduces light-sensitive algae proteins into neurons to let researchers turn them on or off in response to different colors of light. So utilizing infrared lights, different colors, they'll be able to turn the brain circuits on or off. So if you guys don't know, kind of like our computer chips that we have, where it's a whole bunch of binary code of ones and zeros constantly being turned on and off in order to communicate. Our brains kind of do the same thing. These circuits, all these different circuits, just thousands of circuits in our brains are constantly just popping off, on and off, to send signals, and that's how it communicates. Again, to speak, to process things, to think, emotional response, and all these types of movements and all these actions that we do. And so they're trying to figure out how the brain works. They still can't figure it out on how it goes. Again, proof that there is indeed a divine creator. You think all these years that, these people who believe in the Big Bang and all this stuff and evolution, they think through billions of years of evolution, they still cannot figure out how the brain works when it comes to all the complex circuitry that goes on in there. That just happened to come, nothing exploded into something, and then one cell formed into multiple cells, and then through, billions of years, we evolved into what we have going on, and they still can't figure it out. To me, that takes a lot more faith than believing that there's a divine creator who created something so incredibly complex that we as humans just can't figure it out. That's because that's what the Bible says. That's how it all unfolded. But again, it takes more faith to believe in the Big Bang thing than that. But that's a side trail. Either way, they're still trying to figure out how the brain works when it comes to this stuff. It says optogenetics have been a transformative tool in neuroscience, but there are limitations on what can be done with existing techniques, in part due to their reliance on light in the visible spectrum. Hong said, the brain is quite opaque to visible light, so getting the light to the cells you want to stimulate typically requires invasive optical implants that can cause tissue damage and skull-mounted fiber optic tethers that make it hard to study many kinds of natural behavior. Thinking as a materials scientist about ways to overcome these challenges, Hong recognized that biological tissues, including the brain and even the skull, are essentially transparent to infrared light, which would make it possible to deliver the light much deeper into the brain. So utilizing a light that can just pass through the skull and tissue that we have makes it easy access to the brain. That's why they're using infrared. This experiment demonstrated that the new technique makes it possible to stimulate neurons anywhere in the brain through the intact scalp and skull, with hardly any of the light scattering that would make this impossible with light in the visual spectrum. Remarkably, this worked even when the beam of infrared light was positioned as far as a meter above the animals' heads. Hong sees immediate applications of the technique for the growing movement in neuroscience to study the brain circuits involved in natural social behavior in mice in order to better understand the systems that underlie social cognition in humans. Like us, mice are social species, but studying an animal's natural behavior within a social group is challenging with a head-mounted fiber optic tether, Hong said. This approach makes it possible for the first time to modulate specific neurons and circuits in freely behaving animals. One could just shine invisible infrared light over an enclosure with co-housed mice to study the contributions of particular cells and circuits to an animal's behavior within a social group. So what they're saying is, if we know that we're going to be put under some type of social test, and so they put a rig on our head to try and figure this stuff out, it makes it weird because we consciously at that point know that we're being studied and trying to study our social habits. And so our social habits will not be natural anymore. They want to be able to read our thoughts and our processes in a situation where we don't know it's going on, so they can get a deeper understanding of the brain circuitry and who we are. Again, they will know more about us than we know about ourselves. But there's one last part of this article that screams everything that we need to know, that puts the final cherry on the top. It says conventional neuromodulation approaches gave us the ability to flip a few of the switches at a time in the brain to see what different circuits do. So they're able to determine what these brain circuits do, and they had control of them. And he says, our goal is to take these techniques a step further to give us precise control over the entire switchboard, the brain, at the same time. Their goal is to use infrared light to be able to gain access to every single switch in our brain, to have full control, which means they'll be able to turn on and off signals for our movements, our thought processes, our emotions, how we speak, how we process things, the information we have, how we process that information, what we see, all of these things. They want to use infrared light to be able to control all of that, which would get full, not only mind control, but body control at the same time. And this is, again, happening back in 2022. It's usually wise to think that technology that they're just telling us about, they have at least 10 years in advance. So something tells me that they've got this stuff locked and loaded, ready to go for whenever they choose to use it. Does that mean they're freely using it now? I don't believe so. I believe a lot of this technology, they're holding on for the right time to do it. And I think this is a case for just that. So I wanted to cover these things kind of on the technological side when it comes to mind control and psychological warfare, when it comes to brain chips, reading minds, as well as using lasers in order to gain control of people's brains. These are very much abilities and technologies that I personally believe will be used sometime in the future for the Antichrist beast system, not only to manipulate people and have the capacity to read their thoughts, but also to help the Antichrist with his display of lying signs and wonders. And either way, these technologies are being developed in order to help mind control and wrangle in society as a whole, to wrangle in people. And so this should finish off the last bit of our PSYWAR series. Again, these are just a couple things that I wanted to put forward as kind of a bonus. Again, I couldn't get to them in the actual series. And so hopefully this gives you an idea, rounds out the different history and practices and techniques, as well as technologies being used when it comes to the psychological warfare. Again, we talk about these things as Christians because these are tools that Satan is actively using in order to bring in this beast system, to prepare the minds of society to get policies and agendas forward. And so this is very, very key.